As I've mentioned, today we'll be talking a little bit about creating a kick-ass proposal. And yeah, I think as usual, we want to kind of keep the conversation today relatively casual and free-flowing. So feel free to interrupt me anytime you want and ask me any questions. You can just send me a direct message if you're shy to send to the chat group, or if you're shy to unmuting yourself and speaking to the group. Feel free to just send me a DM. Happy to kind of answer those questions as well. Don't worry about that. So before I begin, I think I'll just do a quick introduction again of myself. So I think as many of you have known, I see that there's quite a lot of familiar names, so I won't kind of elaborate too much. But I've been a freelancer for about 5 years now, and my background is actually in consulting. So my first freelance business was actually in consulting. Surprise, surprise. And it's kind of like been 5 years since I started that consulting journey. And since then, I've managed to kind of build a 6-digit agency. And it has actually, sorry, I'm just going to mute Elise. So the business has actually been scalable, and I've actually pretty much has been operating the business pretty much hands off. I've managed to kind of pass it to someone else. And my hope in running these freelancer masterclasses is really to help impart some of the understanding of freelancing journey and freelancing industry that I've had in the past 5 years, and sharing some of my learnings in the past 5 years with as many people as possible. And to that note as well, I actually have a company that I co-founded with Aditya. It is called Ravenry, and our business is really around building solutions, technology solutions that support freelancers in scaling their business. So that's also another business that we are working on right now. So just to kind of recap real quick as well about the few episodes that we've done in the past, I think for those who've kind of like joined, you know that we started very much with, a bit of an introspection journey into why we want to do, we want to kind of like be a freelancer. We want to do this thing that we're doing now, which can seem very masochistic for a lot of people who are not very comfortable with the idea of, entrepreneurship. But I think we started our journey in the masterclass by exploring that because personally, I find that it's really, really important for you to kind of like have a clear idea what you want to do with your life and why you're doing this before you jump head into this deep end side of the pool. So we started there. And then we also spent the past 3 episodes talking a little bit about how you can package your services and then how you can find your customers. And I think last week we talked a little bit about, figuring out how to price your solution and some pricing strategies that you can implement in your freelancing services. And today, of course, we want to put some of those things together into then, now that you know what offerings you are, providing to your clients, you know how to find your clients, and you know how to price your services. The next question is, how do you put all of that together into an enticing proposal that your customers or your clients will be, interested in looking at, and ultimately interested in closing that deal with you. So let's begin. So first and foremost, I think I just want to ask a quick question to everyone. I'm not sure like what is the I guess the propensity or the likelihood of you writing a proposal in your life as a freelancer. I think that's because a lot of freelancers that I've spoken with, they are usually part of a marketplace where you don't really need to write very elaborate proposal in your project or for your projects, right? And so I think a lot of freelancers don't really kind of like have the experience or understanding of why kind of like, they should create a proposal and why it is for certain types of project is quite critical. So before I begin, I just want to kind of like ask real quick and just give me a thumbs up or just like drop me a chat. Has anyone here not written a proposal ever in their life as a freelancer? Give me a thumbs up if you have not done that before. Okay, I see one person hasn't done it. Anyone else? Okay, great. So it seems like most people here has written a proposal before, right? So then a quick question to those people who's kind of like, have done this before. Why do you create a proposal, and when do you create that proposal? Just drop me a chat, or just, unmute yourself and shout it out, or just DM me as well. It's fine. I just want to kind of get a feel in terms of like what you think is the role of a proposal in deal making. Any thoughts? Any comments? Nope. Okay. I'll share my perspective then. So in my experience, I have never kind of like gone onto a freelancer marketplace to kind of like try to scale my business. And the reason for that is quite simple, is because I think I do consulting service, and it's really difficult to compete in a marketplace with a lot of homogeneous, service providers. It's very hard for me to differentiate myself in those situations. So from the get-go, I have decided very clearly to avoid marketplaces as a freelancer, because I think that it would very much undermine my ability to sell real value and to extract, like the right fee and the right reward for my efforts for my clients. So that's kind of like one of the reasons why I actually never been on a freelancer marketplace. And that also means that in my consulting or freelance consulting journey, oftentimes I have to work doubly hard to convince my clients or potential clients that I am the right person to do the job, right? Because in a marketplace, at least, they get to see your rate, they get to see your reviews, they get to see your profile, and there is some semblance of, comparative information there that helps clients to figure out whether or not you are better than candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, right? Whereas for me, as someone who is kind of like standalone, essentially, I'm not part of a marketplace. Oftentimes there is no point of comparison for the client, and it's very difficult for them to kind of assess, whether or not I'm a good fit for their job. So for me, a proposal is basically a document that highlights my credibility and also highlights my promise in terms of what I can do for the client to solve their specific problem. And on top of that, proposal is also, for me, it's a document that shows how much I understand my client's problems and their industry, right? So I think oftentimes when people think about proposal, they just think about, like this is just a document that highlights, my scope of work, what I'm going to do, my fees, my timeline, and that's it, right? I would actually challenge that assumption and probably kind of like, get you guys to think a little bit about about proposal as something that is a lot more strategic than just a document that highlights the offer and the scope of work that you're going to give to your client. Okay. And actually, there are a lot of situations where, and this is where I'm going to like preface this conversation or this meeting by saying that there are a lot of situations where you should not create a proposal. And I think, again, like the reason why I kind of like got into, freelance is because I was a consultant and I wanted to kind of like sell my consulting service. That was kind of like where I started. And naturally for me, writing a proposal is something that, I've been exposed to for many, many years of my life as a, like a corporate consultant, right? So for me, it's very clear that I need to kind of like produce this. But there are a lot of situations, as I learned as a freelancer, where actually creating a proposal could be counterproductive to you closing a deal, or helping you build credibility with a client, or helping you facilitate the speed through which you want to close that deal, right? So there's a couple of things that I would actually consider whenever you are about to write a proposal. So one is, the first thing is, you want to think about the deal size that you're getting into. There are a lot of projects of which the deal size is just way too small for you to warrant spending time creating proposal, right? Proposal takes a lot of time, and you want to do a good job because this is a reflection of your credibility. So oftentimes I spend quite a bit of time writing proposals. But for me, a simple rule of thumb that I use to determine whether or not something is worthwhile to pursue and worthwhile to kind of create a proposal for is a 5% rule, right? So it's quite simple. So I only create a proposal if 5% of the value of the proposal covers my cost of creating the proposal. Okay, let me repeat that, okay? I only create a proposal when the deal size, right, is big enough that 5% of the value of that deal can cover the cost of me creating a proposal. Now, you might ask, it doesn't cost you anything, like creating a proposal. You just have to sit down, you just have to pull up, a PowerPoint or Word document and just start typing away, right? It shouldn't cost you that. It shouldn't cost you a dime, right? I actually beg to differ because in my experience, it does take a significant amount of time. And I think, as we've talked about in my past episode, one of the most important invisible costs that freelancers often incur but do not charge their client is all of their sales and marketing activities and all of your back-end activities, operational activities, right? So these are your overhead. And to me, creating a proposal is a cost. There is a cost tag to it. and that is the amount of time I spend writing it, right? So the amount of time I spend writing a proposal, right, is potentially could be the time I spend actually getting billable hours from other projects or from other clients, right? So if I were to put aside my other projects, sit down and try to put together a proposal for a new project, that project better be worth it, right? And that's why I use the 5% rule for me to kind of like, validate really quickly whether or not, that is a worthwhile project for me to write a proposal for, right? Just because a project is not worthwhile to write a proposal for doesn't mean you don't pursue the project. It just means that you probably do not need to spend a lot of time writing a proposal. It probably just means you just need to send them an email. You just need to send them a one-pager quotation and see if the client will respond with a deal, right? And yeah, most of the time with smaller projects, that's what I do with my clients. And oftentimes the deal just go through without me having to, spend like 5 hours, 10 hours putting together a really nice comprehensive proposal, right? So I think that's the first thing you need to consider when you are, as a freelancer, when you're kind of like looking at a deal. Is that deal big enough of a size for you to invest time and energy to create a proposal for, right? So that's the first thing. Once that particular project warrants or tick that first box, which is yes, it is worthwhile for me to spend time to produce that proposal, the next question I ask myself is whether or not the solution that is required for that project is complex, okay? So there are situations where the project fee can be quite high, but the solution is actually quite simple, right? So for example, the client just need me to, like have a call with them every other day, to talk about, like topic A or industry A, right? For those kind of engagements, typically I wouldn't even like write a proposal because it's quite straightforward, right? Even though the project value might be big, I don't actually kind of like spend time doing that because it's quite straightforward what the engagement model is. It's quite straightforward what the deliverables are. So I don't necessarily want to sit down and spend time doing that. Instead, I just kind of like send them a typical rate card or a general, hourly, rate, rate-based quotation or proposal that is usually templatized by me. And off we go and we just start the project, right? And the good thing about that is for a lot of clients, oftentimes timeliness and speed to start is important when they're engaging with freelancers. And that's why they work with freelancers, because we are flexible and we're fast. And by putting together a proposal, usually that slows down the process, that becomes cumbersome and might actually deter you from getting a project, right? So again, I want to preface that this whole session by saying that there are a lot of situations where you don't need a proposal, and I will just make sure that you don't fall into the trap of creating a proposal for every single one of your deal. Okay. The third criteria for me that I look at when I am thinking about writing a proposal is whether or not the sales process is long and complicated, right? Now, this again depends on the deal that you're working on. So sometimes for me, for example, when I work with my clients, oftentimes there's a lot of stakeholders involved in their business that want to understand what they're paying for, right? Like what the vendor is creating for them. That means that I need to make sure that my buyer, so buyer is whoever I'm talking to, whoever is buying my service directly, right? They are able to articulate clearly what my offerings are, what my values are, and why they should work with me, right? And oftentimes that means that we need to produce a document that will help them do that presentation with their stakeholders, right? Because most of the time I may not have access to their CEO or to the CTO, etc., right? So I need to prep them and set these buyers up for success so that they can convince their stakeholders that I'm worth working with, and I am actually able to, and they are actually able to articulate all those values, right, that I bring to the table, right? So that's kind of like one of the sub reasons why I would create a proposal. The other one is sometimes it's just compliance. Like I work with a lot of banks, so oftentimes with banking clients, they have a very long and convoluted sales process. Even if you're a designer, even if you are a copywriter, I bet you if you've worked with a banking client, you know that the process can be quite arduous and it can be quite challenging. So having a proposal usually is just a very helpful, it's just a necessary step that you need to take to kind of like meet that requirements that they have. And there's just no way around it. So most of the time for clients like that, you just need to kind of like, go ahead and write a proposal. So typically these are the three situations where I would kind of produce a proposal, but most of them again hinges on the first one, which is whether or not the deal size is big enough for me to invest time in doing so. So if you're going ahead and you've kind of like decided that this project is worth it, it's big enough for me to write a proposal, the cost will cover, like the 5% will cover my cost of producing a proposal, it's fine, let's go with it. what are the things that you need to consider, right? So for me, there are three things that you need to think about. These are just requirements or criteria or checklists that you need to think about when you're writing a proposal. And whenever you're proofreading a proposal, these are the three things that you always have to think about, right? First, is your proposal client-centric? And by that, what I mean is that, is it written for your client, right? It's not written for you, right? It's written for your client, right? It's written in a way that your client or your buyer can understand it and can appreciate it, right? It's not written in a way that you like, in the design that you prefer, right? It's not like subjective to your preferences. It's important that you make it so that it's customized to what your clients prefer and what they need, okay? So that's very important when you look at a proposal. Second one is, are you building credibility with your proposal, right? Credibility involves a lot of things, right? So one is it designed well, right? Is it formatted correctly? Does it have all the key information that will help make you look good, like customer testimonials, like case studies, like, you know, for example, if you are, again, like me, a consultant, or let's say you're a social media, like, you know, a strategist, right? You might want to provide like a clear framework through which you are, you know, creating the strategy for the client's projects. You are turning that strategy into, you know, implementable plans and action plans, right? And you are actually helping them measure the right ROI, for example, right? That shows your credibility as a social media specialist or social media strategist, right? So the second question I ask myself all the time when I'm creating a proposal is the proposal helping me look good, right? If it doesn't, don't even bother making a proposal or sending it to your client, because it just reduces your chance of closing a deal, right? So make sure that your proposal is that impressive. Third one is whether or not your proposal is clear enough for your client. And this can be significantly subjective compared to, depending on like what kind of clients you're working with. Certain clients will require a lot of detail and a lot of you know, steps and a lot of articulation of what you'll do for them. Some clients do not need, you know, a very detailed proposal, as long as it's clear, like what you're doing for them, what are the steps, what are the deliverables, right? They're happy with it. So again, depending on what kind of clients you're working with, you want to make sure that, you know, the proposal that you are sharing with them is clear, has a nice flow to it, makes sense, logical, right? And easily can be easily read and processed by the customer, okay? So that's the third thing. So these are the three C's, in my opinion, of creating a great proposal. So let's kind of like break it down a little bit and get a bit more tactical. Throughout this session, I'll try to share my personal experiences creating some of these proposals, and I'll share with you some of the proposals I've made as well. So, you know, feel free to jump in again if you have any questions about the specific way I've kind of like arranged my proposal and stuff like that. Happy to answer and address them as I go. First thing is client centricity, right? So again, as I mentioned, client centricity is all about, you know, putting your client in the middle and understanding clearly what your clients, who your clients are, what are they like, you know, what do they care about, what do they worry about, right? I think the first thing that you need to do in kind of like getting a clear understanding of your clients and their behavior and their preferences is just to build that relationship with them. And I think as a freelancer, oftentimes, especially kind of when you think about yourself as a marketplace freelancer from Upwork or, you know, Fiverr, etc., you don't necessarily think that you need to jump on a call with your client. I beg to differ. So again, a lot of the great clients that I've built across the years are built because I talk to them so much and I call them all the time and they call me all the time, and we just build a relationship and trust based on those conversations. And that really helps me understand, you know, what are they concerned about? You know, what are some of the challenges they're facing right now beyond the scope of the project I'm working on? Because all of those understanding is necessary for you to create the right solution to address their problem, okay? So pick up your phone, right? Jump on a call, and, or even like, you know, if you're in Southeast Asia or in Asia, I think a lot of clients prefer to use WhatsApp or, you know, text messages. Just drop them a text and ask them questions really quickly, and make sure that you are building that relationship and getting that understanding from their side. What are their challenges, etc., right? So that is kind of like really, really important. Second thing is, you want to also understand when you're having this conversation with the clients, right? A few things. One is, when you're talking about a specific project, what are some of the success like criteria for them, right? And success criteria is not just about the metric, right? It's about how they feel, right? Like, what is their state of, you know, being in that work, right? When they successfully completed this project, will they get promoted? Will they get a raise? Will they get, you know, I don't know, like a compliments from their CEO, right? So you want to understand like what does success look like for your client. And when I'm talking about client, I mean like your buyer, because they're the ones who's working closely with you. What does success look like for them, right? Because you want to make sure that they look good. You want to make sure that you understand what drives them. What do they want to get out of this project from a professional and also a personal level before you kind of like put together a proposal that will solve that problem. Because you want as much as possible for your solution to address not just the business needs of your client, but also their personal needs as well, as a person working in that organization, right? So again, these are the kind of things that you will never be able to surface if you don't have a good relationship with your customer, if you don't pick up a phone, if you don't go and have a coffee with them. So try to kind of like do all that, because it's very important for you in these conversations to understand that particular aspect of your client, and understand for that specific job what does success look like for them, right? And during these conversations, typically there are three things that I will try to identify more specifically, right? First one is what we call hidden desires or hidden fears, right? Now, what I mean by that is oftentimes when clients come to us with a job brief, it is very, very, I would say, technical, right? So they'll tell you, oh, I need like 5 social media posts. Oh, I need a virtual assistant that can do 20 hours of, calls with me, with my clients. I need someone, a consultant who can help me run 3 workshops, right? So those are the very objective, tactical, practical output and deliverables, right? That your customers usually, or your clients usually want, and they can actually articulate. But what oftentimes we do not know are the things that they actually want to achieve for themselves, right? The fears that they have about that specific project, about their role in the business, about their KPI, etc., right? So those are the kind of hidden desires and fears that you want to surface as much as possible, right? I'll talk a little bit about this in the next slide. Let me just go through item 2 and 3, and then we'll kind of like come back to item 1 again. So the first thing that you want to understand is those hidden desires and fears, right? The second one that is important is to understand the constraints that they're facing, right? Constraints can be anything from budget, timeline, resources, the kind of people they're working with, etc., right? So that's the second category of things that you need to surface through this conversation. The third one that you want to understand is what I call the deal maker, right? So deal maker can be a few categories of things, subcategories of things. This can be who are the ultimate decision maker for this project, right? So who do you actually need to impress as a freelancer, right? You may not be able to meet them in person, but it is crucial that when you put together a proposal, that proposal will appeal to that deal maker, okay? The other deal maker could be something like a bonus feature or a bonus offering that you can help solve for the client to help you seal that deal, right? So it's usually items that is not part of the scope, but if you're able to solve it, the client will see that as a giant value add, right? Again, these are things that customers will not articulate to you in an RFP or via an email, right? It's something that you need to understand by talking to them, right? So try as much as possible to spend time with your customers and try to think about their problem from their perspective. So let me kind of like wind back to what I mentioned about hidden desires or fears, right? So when I talk about hidden desires or fears, these are personal drivers that affect people, whether in a professional or personal setting, right? Whether it's with the immediate stakeholders or other stakeholders outside of the business, that will affect them in their decision-making process, that will help them make a decision whether or not you are the right person to work with or not, right? So I've kind of like put it into a very simple quadrant, okay? So 2x2 quadrant, professional, personal, immediate stakeholders, other stakeholders, okay? And if I were to fill it in, these are some of the examples of things that you might want to consider as you like talk to your customers to understand like what are some of the key fear and desires that they have, right? So let's start from the top left one, right? Professional, immediate stakeholder, right? So this is a quadrant that highlight desires that people have professionally, so work-related stuff, and that is in relation to immediate stakeholders in the project, right? So these are people who are directly, working with your buyer in the project, right? So what are some of the desires or fears that these people might have, right? So one, right, your buyer might be keen, or their focus might be to achieve like a very specific business ROI, right? So again, maybe you're a freelance designer, right? When you talk to your customer, maybe they don't really articulate that, oh, like this, we are meant to kind of create this campaign, it's meant to kind of help us launch a new product, and we are meant to get like 2,000 members or 2,000 like signups, in the first month, right? Maybe your customers do not tell you that because you are a freelance designer, right? And maybe what they tell you is that, oh, we need like 3 images, one hero image, one for our social media, one for this, one for that. And can you do it in like 2 weeks, right? So maybe that's what they tell you, right? But what's important is to understand what are the key ROIs that they are worried about or they are hoping to achieve, right? So this is like one of the desires that's hidden that is affecting them professionally, but is in relation to the immediate stakeholders, right? Another thing that might be important that is a little bit different is, maybe it's not related to the project, but they just want to look good in front of their boss, right? It's got nothing to do whether or not if the project is doing well or not, right? They don't really care about the metric, but what they care about is how their boss view them, right? As a team member, as an employee, right? So maybe that's something that you want to understand, because then you can figure out different ways for them to look good in front of their boss, right? So I'll give you an example of that. So I work for, again, like in my consulting project, one of the things that my clients use us for is to kind of like help them think about challenges in, like, let's say, product growth, right? And while for me as a consultant, the output of my service is some sort of a recommendation document and some sort of a plan, implementable plan, to help them grow that product, right? So that could be in the form of a new like UI UX for your website, a new marketing campaign. We help you reorganize your team so that it's a little bit more lean and it has the right talent mix so that you can achieve your goal. For example, like, those are the deliverables that I will create, right? Those are the things that I will do for the client, right? But in the process of kind of like closing that deal, right, I realized that my clients actually are trying to look really good in front of their boss. They are a new person. They just got hired. They wanted to make sure that, they are building the right relationship with the boss because they're bringing a new vendor as well. So what we did was we actually, kind of like having found out about that, what we did was we actually helped them, create an amazing presentation. Like we do a kick-ass, document that allows them to basically go to their boss, right? And allow them to present some of these ideas that we actually as a consultant came up with, right? And make them look really good, because the boss thinks that, oh, all of this like suggestions and all of this strategy and all this recommendation came from this person, right? And they look really, really good as a result, right? And that's kind of like a simple example of how you can actually help create an amazing proposal and identify the client's fear and desires and address them through your sales process or through your proposal making process, right? So as much as possible, during that conversation, you want to identify as much of these things as possible and address them so that you look really good and your clients look really good, right? So that's an example from quadrant 1. So if you go to quadrant 2, right, it could be, this is the personal and then immediate stakeholder quadrant, right? So some of the things that your clients will always think about will be things like, oh, will I get promoted if I do this project successfully? Can I get a raise, right? Or maybe they have some fears around, oh, like I really don't want to look stupid, right? If I fail on this project, this is why I'm trying to hire the best freelancers in the market, because I need this project to be successful, right? So again, once you've kind of like surfaced these issues or these challenges or these fears, right? Figure out like what are the right solutions for you to kind of like make them feel better, right? Resolve some of the risk for them so that they'll be comfortable working with you, right? So for example, with regards to fear of looking stupid, right? So I also have a lot of clients who are always afraid of looking stupid in front of their boss, right? So what we did was we often offer them like, bite-sized solution along the way, so they can slowly kind of like show drafts of, our output and our deliverables to their bosses and allow them to kind of like manage the boss's expectation in terms of, like whether or not they're happy with, a specific campaign or a specific transformation project. And through that, like, bite-sized draft and conversation and weekly cadence with the boss, they basically minimize any risk of the boss, seeing, an output of a project, 3 months on the line without knowing kind of like what's the progress been, and just, being upset about it because they were not informed by the progress. So they don't know like what's going on. And maybe they have like a crazy expectation about the output, right? So we help them minimize a lot of those issues by building the right, what we call way of working with the client, so that they can minimize some of this risk and make sure that they don't look stupid in front of their boss. So that's another example of, what we did for our clients once we kind of surface some of the fears, right? The thing about your client as well is that they don't just worry about how they are viewed and how they perform within the working environment or within the working team. Oftentimes, they're also kind of like concerned about how the broader industry and the ecosystem view them, right? So from a professional setting, when we kind of like look at the hidden desires or fears in relation to other stakeholders. It could be a desire to get an industry award from this branding campaign, a desire to not have to work with other vendors that are not great, like they're just afraid of that, right? So maybe that could be something that, is concerned. From a personal standpoint, right, in relation to other stakeholders, maybe all they want is a vendor that will allow them to go home early. They don't want to work with a vendor that is, difficult to work with, that is challenging, that doesn't give good quality, doesn't communicate well, always call them after hours, etc. Right? So maybe that's kind of like their concern, right? Or maybe they just kind of like prefer to work with someone who has like a specific style and cultural fit, right? Maybe they already have a specific way of working inside of their team that they want to preserve, so that when they work with us as a vendor, they don't have to kind of like change that style and change that process all over again, right? So again, all of these are things that you need to consider as you're kind of like producing that proposal. Now, to the second item, as I mentioned much earlier today, is constraints. So what are the different constraints that you want to, make sure you're aware of as you're kind of like producing this proposal, right? So the obvious ones, I'll call it out, right? Things like timeline and budget. I think those are pretty clear. So figure out what are your clients' hard deadlines. Figure out, and I do suggest this to a lot of freelancers, which is just ask your clients, what is their budget? Ask them, right? It doesn't mean that you have to give them a proposal that fits that budget. No. It just gives you an idea of what they're willing to pay, right, for specific value that they're expecting, right? And again, depending on how you write a proposal, you can charge more or less, right? But at least you have an idea of like what constraints they're working with, and you can figure out ways through which you can work around that, right? The third thing that you want to know is the scope of work, right? So what kind of deliverables are important for them? What are the kind of output that they need? What are the kind of engagement that they want from you, right? And that leads us to the fourth point, which is way of working, right? It's also very important for you to understand whether your client is a high touch or low touch client, whether your client is a decision maker. Can they make decision, or do you always have to work with them to pitch your idea again to get to their boss's level to get approval? Because that process will take a lot of time and you might want to charge more for that, right? So again, understanding that constraint will help you price your service much better, right? And also the engagement model, right? Are you going to talk to them like on a weekly basis? Are you going to review things with them on a weekly basis, or only when you've submitted a deliverable, so that you wait for their revision notes and you can work on that? Or is it going to be mostly ad hoc, right? So again, depending on what kind of way of working they're used to, you might want to adjust your proposal accordingly, right? Finally, you also want to understand what substitutes they have right now in the business, right? So most clients, they have alternatives. They have plan B, C, D, E, F, G, right? So oftentimes you're not the only option they have. So you also want to understand very clearly what substitutes you are competing with, right? So your competition can be Canva, right? Like if, let's say you're a designer, because maybe your client decide, you know what, I'm just going to do my own logo, right, myself. Possible, right? So understanding that substitutes will help you again understand what kind of value you want to emphasize in your proposal. And then the last thing that I mentioned as well is, what are the deal makers that's important for your client, right? So these are things like, who are the decision makers? How would you position this proposal so that, you can close the deal quickly, right? So let me give you an example of this, because this might not be very intuitive. So for example, we have a couple of clients that approach us with the idea of getting us to kind of do workshops for them, right? So like all they want actually is for us to train their internal team so that the internal team knows how to do ABC, right? But the problem is they don't have budget from the HR and training team to pay us for training, right? So instead, they have to reposition us, or we have to reposition our proposal to be a vendor that teaches or that kind of helps people get onboarded on new IT system, right? Because technically we're teaching them how to be more agile and how to be more innovative so that they can use the IT system, right? But again, understanding what are the deal makers for them will help you identify the right way to position your proposal so that you can close that deal with them, right? Different situations, right? You have different problems. Some clients care more about positioning you as an expert. Some clients want to just position you as like, oh, you're just a freelance designer. Don't tell people that you're helping me with social media strategy because I don't want to look stupid. So again, understanding all of those will be very, very important to help you kind of create the right proposal, right? And finally, this is what I call a bonus feature, which is identifying what other problems that your customers are facing, right? Your clients are facing, that you potentially can solve as part of your deal, right? That you can throw in as a bonus feature, right? As a bonus solution, right? So that this kind of like helps you being perceived, helps you kind of like be perceived as someone who is a little bit more valuable as a vendor, rather than just someone who do ABC as per the client's RFP, right? So understanding like, those things will help you again increase your chances of success with the proposal. So now let's talk a little bit about credibility and clarity, right? So again, these are the other two components of a proposal that is really, really important, right? So I think the first thing that is important for you when you're building credibility in your proposal is to echo back what your client has been telling you, right, through all your conversation in your proposal, right? So I see the common mistake oftentimes that I see in proposal is that people jump straight into what they can do for the client, right? So for example, if you are a writer, for example, right? People oftentimes just jump in straight into like, oh, I'm going to offer you like 15 articles, one per week, and it's going to be about ABC topic, right? And it's going to be 2,000 words, and we're going to make sure that it's SEO optimized, etc., right? So people oftentimes go into the proposal with just the solution, right? Rather than re-articulating the problem that the customers has actually shared with you at length, right? So in my opinion, it's really, really important that you focus first and foremost, the first page of a proposal is likely to be like the customer's problem. Just re-articulate it back in a way that is clear, that the customers look at it and they understand, oh wow, like he is able to, or she is able to kind of like very clearly, paraphrase, like, some of the things that I've mentioned, that shows that he understood what my problems are. He understood what I'm trying to achieve, right? And to me, it's really important if you can like just re-articulate a lot of those problem statements so that your client feel that they're in safe hands and that you understand what they're trying to do. The other benefit of making, of kind of like creating this page is so that you are also anchored as a person in terms of what problem you're trying to solve for the client. Oftentimes, as you are creating a proposal, you just start to get distracted and forget, freelancers are creative people. So you start thinking about different things you want to add, or like, oh, we should add a graphic solution. We should add like, we should help them edit. We should do copywriting for them as well. We should help them do publishing as well. We help them find like, the right media publication, right? But the challenge with offering all of that is that you suddenly forget what your client's core problems are, right? And therefore, I think with a lot of the proposals with a lot of people that kind of has come to me with suggestions on how to create a great proposal, I always ask them to make sure that they articulate the client's problem statements very, very clearly at the beginning of every proposal, right? And also the other thing that I want to emphasize is it's very important that the components of your proposal, right, contains the client's problem statement, what goal they're trying to achieve. So not just like the problems they're facing, but also like what is the result that they want you to generate at the end of the day, right? And the question of how you're going to help them get there, right? So these are the three main components. I'll talk about the goal and the how a bit, but hopefully you understand why I want you guys to focus on the problem in the proposal as well. Now, when we talk about, the end goal, right? I guess the success, how success look like, right? I usually try to get our freelancers to, and even myself, I usually kind of do this exercise myself, which is creating a from-to table, right? To help me understand again, where is the client right now in terms of, their state of mind, in terms of their state of business, and where do we as a freelancer want to bring them to, right? So, what is the end goal? How will that look like, right? So I usually do a very simple exercise of this, and this is usually just in my scratch pad. I don't usually publish it to the client or include it in the proposal unless it is a complex project. Okay, so in a complex project, you want to articulate all the from-tos. Okay, in a simple project, you don't have to. I just suggest that you do it anyway for your own practice, because it just helps you clarify, how you can help your client get there, right? So this is just these are just some examples of, some from-tos that I've kind of looked at in the past, right? So sometimes clients' concern is, yes, they ask you to do kind of like, article writing or like design or consulting, right? But ultimately, they're concerned about like being busy, and what they want is they just want to have time to work on other projects that they have in the business, right? So it's from busy to having time to work on strategic projects. In certain situations, it could be they have a lack of capability, so they don't have a specialist in their team to do, what you can do, right? So what they want is actually someone who is an expert to help them with their project, right? And if you kind of like just go all the way down, there could be certain situations where they're just afraid of failing because maybe they don't have the expertise, they don't have the capability, they don't have the resources, they don't have the time. Maybe it's a new company, it's a new project, it's a new boss, maybe they don't want to look bad. So maybe the from state is fear of failure, right? And what you want them to kind of like feel is that risk of failing is being hedged, right? It's being removed, right? So what you want to provide them is that sense of security and certainty and confidence, right, in moving forward with you as a solution provider, right? So the reason why this is so important is because this from to state or this from to table should really define the way you articulate your solution later on in a proposal. Let me give you an example of a from to document that I created for one of my clients, right? So this is a very, very detailed like from to document, from state to state. And the reason why we've kind of like done something so elaborate is because the client, we have a really, really complex projects with multiple stage of deliverables, multiple milestones, multiple stakeholders we have to deal with. And we need to make sure that we are ticking all the boxes for them, right? So we articulated all this in the proposal, again, to build our credibility as a solution provider that shows them that, wow, Ricky and his team really listened to what we want, and they really understood what we are struggling with right now, which is the from state, right? So again, depending on your project, you might want to include this in your proposal as well to show your client that you understood their problem really, really well. The next thing that you want to do again to build credibility is that this is something, again, that I see people forget to add or include, is to explain very much, like how you're going to solve this problem for them, right? So a lot of proposals I see from freelancers, because I work with freelancers as well, so I see a lot of the proposals that I get from them. They are very focused on deliverables and scope of work. And that is fine if your project is not very big, right? But the thing is, if you have like a very big and complex project, you have to explain to your customer or your client why you're taking these steps. And you have to show them what steps you will be taking to address their problem, right? So this is a real example of a research project or research proposal that we created for one of our clients, right? So we explained very clearly, we want to address core capabilities, insights on pain points, and reframing use cases. And that's why we have 5-step approach, at the bottom to help you solve that problem, right? To help you achieve all those deliverables, right? So we are very intentional in explaining our methodologies because that's what the clients pay you for. They want to pay you to kind of get all this expertise, right? They don't just want the output. They want to know that the process you are taking to creating those output is valid, is reliable, and is going to get them the results that they want, right? So articulate all your methodologies as much as you can during this process. This is another example. So again, like in consulting, this is my consulting business, consulting freelancing business. I have to very much convince the client that this methodology and this framework will work really, really well for for their business, right? So I have to kind of like show them this is the methodology, this is the framework I'll be using, and this is why I'll be using them, right? I explain like every single item on the page, for example, right? So again, this is an example of something that you can create as part of your proposal if it warrants for it. By the way, guys, all of the screenshot that I'm sharing today is from a real proposal. So it's from real proposal, real clients. So we don't make this up. These are things that we've tried and tested and proven to work. So yep, just something for you to note as well. The other thing that I think is a missed opportunity for a lot of freelancers is that they don't actually explain to the clients how they work, right? So this is different from methodology, okay? So methodology is like, okay, so again, let's say you are a designer, you are UI UX designer, right? You're a freelance UI designer who actually helps clients build mobile applications, right? Your methodology could be, first I am going to interview the customer, right? And then I'm going to create an insights report about their problem. And then I'm going to create a first draft of a wireframe of like how the new app will work. And then I will get your review, and then I will create the final, a prototype and design, and then I will test it again, and I will give you the final insights based on my last testing. So that could be your methodology, right? Way of working is completely different, okay? Way of working is how you're going to work with the client and how are you going to interact with them on a day-to-day basis, okay? So that's way of working, right? And what does your service entail in terms of, activities, right? So for example, for me, right, the way of working that I have with my clients is I define very clearly the stages of, my engagement activities. So for example, for me, I will start by, talking to the client about, okay, we first of all need to spend a lot of time with your internal team, and I need to talk to them about ABC. I need to conduct 5 to 20 interviews with you, and I need to talk to you on a weekly basis about this, right? And this will take probably about 2 weeks. And then after that, I will work together with you as a client, right? We will sit together, we'll workshop this together, we'll, have a whiteboard, and we will kind of like, look at all the different ideas that we get from our scoping activity. And we will start to brainstorm, come up with new data, analyze and customize, the solution for you, right? And then finally, once we've kind of like done that step of collaborative design, we will then, as a team, create the actual recommendation document, create the actual deliverables for you, right? So through this process, I actually show the client how I am working internally, right? Behind the scene, behind the curtain, what will Ricky do, right? And that will help them, again, give them some assurance in terms of, okay, like they know what they're doing. I feel comfortable, working with them. I can commit this amount of time working with, Ricky and his team. And again, that will help build a lot of credibility with your client if you do so in your proposal, right? Another thing that I like to do, and again, like depending on your business, you don't really necessarily have to go so elaborate, but I actually have some sort of a design and development principle for my consulting business that we articulate with our clients. So we explain very, very clearly our principles of working, right? So we tell them that, we rely not just on data, but also on intuition. We make sure that we work through a lot of interactions with our client. It's not done in isolation. We make sure that the solution that we create are integratable or can be integrated into their actual business, so you can actually get real results, right? So we define all of this very, very clearly in our proposal, so that, again, clients feel much more assured about like how we are going to create value for them, and that we are not just getting paid to because we are like, an expert, without knowing for real if we are working or not behind the scene, right? So this again shows them that like, oh, we have like some sort of a thought leadership and principles in terms of how we work. More tactically, what you can do is also something like this, and I often do this with a lot of my clients. And this is an example from my business, Ravenry, or research business. We very much spend a lot of time with our client on a day-to-day basis, right? Talking to them, addressing a lot of issues. But during the proposal stage, they might not know that we are that committed, that we spend a lot of time communicating with them and reviewing documents and, getting their revision notes and feedback, right? So during the proposal, what we often do is that we just define very clearly our working cadence, right? And you can mention to your client that, oh, look, like I'll always jump on a call every Thursday at 10 a.m. with you. That's our weekly review. And then every Friday every last Friday of the month, we'll have a monthly review with you and also your team and also your boss to show them like the current progress of the project. And then like outside of those activities with you, internally within our team, we'll also be doing these 3 things, right? So again, this shows your client that you have a very clear process, you have a very clear way of working that again helps you can like build that credibility in front of them. Something like this can be helpful as well. So creating just a very simple project timeline. Again, I think this is a no-brainer. I think everyone should know how to do this, so I won't spend too much time on this. Now, the other thing about proposal that I think oftentimes people miss is that opportunity to offer options for your clients, right? So I see a lot of proposal is very, it's kind of like very one-sided, right? Or it's kind of like very one-dimensional, right? You see a problem from a client and you offer them only one solution without any options. That's not great. And the reason why that's not great is because, one, it doesn't give your clients the assurance that you have different ways you can solve one problem for them, right? So again, this just shows creativity. This just shows credibility on your side. Second is you don't take into account their constraints, right? So again, with different clients, oftentimes they have very different constraints, right? So yes, everyone will have budget and timeline constraint, but for client A, maybe budget is more important than timeline. For client B, maybe timeline is more important than budget, right? So by having a variety of choices for them, this really helps them see what is possible with you and what you can actually offer to them, right? So oftentimes when I create option, the reason why I do that is because I want to show my client the breadth of my capability as a freelancer, right? So maybe when you talk to your clients and you kind of like get the RFP, maybe what they requested from you is just, oh, can I get like 5 articles for a month? That's all I need from you, right? So maybe that is kind of like in reality, that's what they're going to end up with anyway, right? But I oftentimes create another option anyway that says, oh, look, I can also help you do the content strategy. I can help you find the designer for the articles. I can make sure that, we do the proofreading, we'll do the SEO research as well. And for option B, I'm going to charge you a lot more, right? Why do I do that? It's because in the future, if the client thinks that, oh, now today, I actually need to find another freelancer to do all the strategy stuff, they will think of me because in the past proposals that I've sent to them, they've seen that I've offered that capability, right? So in a sense, I am kind of like building potential pipeline or potential clients or potential projects for me in the future already by kind of just providing them with options, right? So in general, for me, providing options with client oftentimes just help kind of like build that credibility because it shows you have that creativity, but at the same time, it just shows the breadth of capability that you have that may be beyond their current requirements or their current scope. There's another reason why I like to add an option. Okay, this is a bit cheeky, is that I like to anchor our clients with something that is kind of like gonna help me negotiate better with them. Okay, so for example, again, right? Let's go back to the writing example that I shared with you. So maybe the client just need 5 articles. Okay, that's all they need, right? But what I did was I decided to give them a full comprehensive solution, end-to-end writing strategy, service, right? And the reason why I do that is because I want to anchor them with that solution, which is going to be much more expensive, right? So that it's much easier for me to close the deal that just requires me to write 5 articles, right? So option 1, right, in this case, is just a dud. I know for a fact that the client won't choose it, but I'm going to add it anyway because it's just going to help them understand my expertise, understand, the kind of pricing that I'm working with, and help them realize that they are so lucky that I'm charging them so cheap for option 2, which is the 5 articles, right? So this is again like a strategy that I often use in helping me to kind of like close the deal and build that credibility very, very quickly with my clients. Now, something to note in this situation as well is not to add too many options. In my experience, the maximum that you can actually add in terms of options to your client is just 3. So you can only have 3 options. Don't go beyond that. Don't go crazy because you do not want your client to, face analysis paralysis as well. You want them to be able to make a decision. So oftentimes, by kind of like providing some of these very simple options, I literally force them to make a choice. And oftentimes the choice is already very obvious. So it just makes negotiation much more, convenient much later on. The other thing about pricing that I often suggest my client is I always ask the freelancers to show the client their top line cost or their top line price or top line fee, right? What I mean by top line is actually the full price that you will actually charge your client before you give them any discounts. Oftentimes, when I see proposals that a lot of freelancers make, they already provide fees or pricing that is already incorporating or inclusive of the discounts that they're going to give the client, right? So for example, in this example, right, instead of charging my client, instead of kind of just saying, oh, I'm going to charge you $175,000 for my service, I actually told my client, I'm going to charge you $293. But because you're such a great client, I'm going to give you 40% discount. And as a result, I'm only going to charge you $175,000, right? So again, like this is a price anchoring strategy that I often use to help a couple of things. One is to help the client understand that, look, my service is not cheap, but because I've worked with you for a while, I'm happy to kind of like give you that discount, and don't ask me for any more discount because I've already given you 40%. So this is one of the reasons why I do this. And I mean, like what I'm saying is we're not overcharging the client. Actually, for real, I am actually valuing my service at $293,000, but it's because I worked with this client for a long time. I'm capable and I'm confident of giving them this discount because I know for sure that they're going to come back to me with more projects, right? So this is an example of like why I do this. The other reason why I do this is that it's just much easier for me to work with the client in the future and price hike in the future, right? So with larger clients, oftentimes the challenge is with procurement, right? So you have to not just convince your buyer that you are a great deal, you also have to convince their procurement team. And in your quotes or in your invoice, when they see that your price is $175,000 for this project, in the future, if you're trying to charge $200,000, it'll be really hard for you to justify why. Because to them, you used to charge 175,000 and it doesn't make sense for you now to charge 200,000, right? So it just makes it much easier in the future for you to price hike or to increase your price, especially when you have to deal with procurement, yada, 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 right? So again, it just helps you with compliance and internal processes when it comes to negotiation. And also this makes your client look really good in front of their boss, because they're going to go to their boss and they're going to say, look, I managed to get you 40% discount from this vendor. You should work with him, right? So it makes your client look really, really good, because it makes them look like they are the one who got the business such a good deal, when in reality, you're already ready to offer them that 40% discount, right? Just don't build it into your final price, break it down, show them the top line. The other pricing strategy that I would recommend for, or maybe something to consider for your proposal, is bundling strategy. I do not suggest that you do this for all of your projects. Again, depending on different projects, you might want to bundle or unbundle, right? So some criteria for you to follow, right? I typically unbundle my services. Unbundle means that I charge clients on an itemized basis. So like, I'll charge you for hourly basis for the advisory. I'll charge you hourly basis for the delivery, implementation, for consultation. So I charge them like, on an itemized basis if I am not clear and they are not clear on the scope of work. The reason I do this is because it's much easier for you to charge the clients for any scope creep that happen, right? So if you bundle all of your service and you say that, okay, for $200,000, I'm going to give you a deliverable, right? The deliverable will be like this item, right? The challenge with that is, if there is any scope creep on any part of your proposal or your scope of work, it's very hard for you to go back to the client and say, hey, by the way, we agreed on 20 hours of this, but now it's 30 hours and I need to charge you more. It's hard because the client will just go back and tell you that, no, we agreed that $200,000 is going to get me deliverable A, right? And as a result, you're not going to have a strong, starting point for negotiation, right? So I would suggest that if the scope of work is not clear or it's very difficult to quantify, try to unbundle it, right? So that it's much easier for you to go back to the client and say, look, like, I have to charge you for this because it's kind of exceeded our initial agreement. And that kind of puts you at a better place, right? Bundling strategy is great if you want to kind of like show client value and you want to create a sense of loss aversion, right? Loss aversion means that the client feels like they're missing out on a great deal. Basically, that's what loss aversion means, right? So when do I do this? So sometimes when a client works with me, they will want maybe 3 deliverables, right? But they may not have budget, So, okay, sorry, let me just kind of restart that. Sometimes when you're working with client, right, the client might want 4 deliverables, right? But in reality, right, they only have budget for 3 deliverables, okay? But what you want to do is that you want to show them that you are someone who can actually be a long-term partner with them. You want to build that credibility and relationship with them. And so what you do is that you tell them, okay, if you buy all 3, I can throw you the 4th one, as part of the deal, right? So again, that is just a strategy for you kind of like to upsell to your client, right? Maybe you won't be able to charge 100% of the 4 services, but you might be able to charge 90%, right, for the 4 services, which is still good, right? Which could still be more than if you were only to sell 2 services to them, right? So I sometimes use bundling strategy to upsell to my client and give them like, an extra something that maybe they would have excluded if I don't give them a special discount for it, right? So I use bundling strategy as a way to kind of like, sell more and get more revenue from the client, but still stick within their budget constraint, right? The other reason why I bundle is if I don't want client to scrutinize my fee breakdown, right? So again, this is in situations where maybe it's very hard for you to define or to itemize your services. What I do in that case is that I just bundle all of that and just tell them that here's a discount, right? A bundle discount. You buy all of it, I'll give you this discount. So for example, right, if again, let's use the writing example. Maybe it's very easy for the client to objectively measure and define what is the value of 5 articles, right? Maybe. But it might be difficult for them to say that, like your content strategy service is worth $10,000. Maybe it's very hard for them to kind of like, value that, right? Maybe it's easier for them to say, no, every article is $1,000. So 5 articles, $5,000, right? But if you tell them that, look, I'm going to charge you like $14,000 for the content strategy and 5 articles, then it just helps you kind of like have that, navigate that conversation a little bit better, because you don't have to have a conversation where you justify why your content strategy service is worth $9,000 or $10,000, right? So sometimes I bundle as well if I don't want to kind of spend too much time articulating or explaining to my client like how each of these services are being charged, or how I'm actually valuing each of these services to them, right? So again, depending on the situation, you might want to use bundling and unbundling strategy for your proposal. The next thing in your proposal that you want to include is case study. So again, this is a no-brainer. I highly suggest that you include any case study that you're allowed to share publicly in your proposal, right? Of course, only choose relevant ones. Okay, if you're producing a proposal for a writing project, don't add like any design projects case study into it, because it'll just show your client that you're probably not a good writer, and this is why you're adding a design portfolio, right? So make sure that you add like relevant case studies. So for example, for me, I always show a case study that highlights 3 things. One is, why do the client use us? So project trigger. What is the process and solution I provide to them, right? So what did we do exactly? And what is the result that we generate for them in terms of ROI? So as much as possible for all projects, I try to quantify with my client what kind of business results they get. And then I include that in my proposal as a case study. Testimonials, again, no-brainer. This is just a screenshot I get for my business Ravenry from G2. So you can do something similar as well. Obviously, as an independent freelancer, you might actually have a different way to collect or solicit testimonials. But I highly encourage that you include this and you collect testimonials from every one of your clients as well. At the end of the day, I think you want to make things really easy for your customers, right? So what we do in our proposal is that we will provide a 1-page summary of all the things that you've talked about. So basically problem, goals, and the how, right? The second thing is you want to give clients options, but you want to make very obvious which option is the right choice for them. So this is what I was talking about earlier, right? Give them options, but know already which one you want them to choose, right? And then design the other options so that they will zoom in on that one option that you want them to choose, right? So that is just going to make things easy for them, because they're already kind of like, making a mental mathematics in their head. And when they look at that option, it's just easy which one is the right choice. Ultimately, also, make sure that if you have a lot of numbers, with your proposal, a lot of, itemized pricing, hourly pricing, simplify the mathematics as much as you can, right? So again, like for me, sometimes I bundle things, I offer a discount, and I calculate all of those directly into the proposal, just so that it's easier for my clients to see what's the value that I'm bringing to them, right? So those are some of the easy things that you can do for your proposal as well. And again, as I mentioned, creating a proposal is not necessary for all your deals. So there are certain situations. I think today what I've shown is something that is really comprehensive. So if you're selling like a 6-digit project, you might want to produce like, a 40-page proposal. If not, then you might want something simple like this, like a 3-pager or 2-pager. But most of the time, it still includes the same component, which is you want to highlight, what you know about them. So what their problems are, what are some of the output that you're going to create for them, how you're going to create it, so the methodology, and then a very simple like options and pricing page, so that they can very quickly make a decision on whether or not they want to proceed. It is already 7:08 here. I know we only booked 1 hour for this event. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to save the negotiation technique and discussion for our next event, which is on episode 6 next week. So I think for now, I will end the session. And if I may, just very quickly kind of talk about, why we're doing this. So I think I've mentioned at the beginning of the call, which is the reason why I do this is because I am quite keen on sharing some of my learnings as a freelancer to as many people as possible. And I also believe that as part of that, freelancer journey, it's really important for us to be part of a community that is helpful and that is supportive of one another. We just started a few communities on Telegram and Discord. And our hope is that we can actually get more people to join this community, so that people start discussing, people start adding value and support each other, and even maybe people can start sharing opportunities and jobs on the platform as well, on the community as well. Just again to make sure that we are all learning together as a community. So if you're keen on joining us, please fill in this feedback form. I will share with you the link as well. You can scan this with your phone. Within the feedback form, there are just 3 simple questions that help us understand what you love or what you not like about this event, right? And that helps us improve our future events. And at the same time, you can also drop your email so that we can invite you to our community. And again, like hopefully we can actually start growing this community so that we can get more people to support each other in their journey as a serious freelancer. In addition